This is a lecture from Open Tuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
We're on chapter 14 of the paper F5 lecture notes, which is the more advanced variances, the ones that are relevant for paper F5. We've already dealt with planning and operational, and the other important one, a few others later, but the other important one is completely separate, is something called mix and yield. And so in this lecture, I want to go through, well, as always, explain what they are and how we calculate them. Now let me just explain, first of all, what we're getting at. And it is important, you can't just learn rules here, because this is a fairly common thing to be asked in section C, the long questions. And if it is there, part of it will be calculations, which is all right, learning rules. But part of it will be writing, making clear that you understand what they are and you haven't just learned a rule. And so just let me write down a simple illustration, which I'm not going to do any numbers on, but just to explain what the problem is. I don't know if you ever buy them, but you can buy fruit juices, which is a mixture. Instead of just buying orange juice or just buying apple juice, I used to love a juice that was a combination of strawberry and banana. It was a mixture of strawberry juice and banana juice. And suppose we were making strawberry and banana juice, and I'd done a standard cost card, and I'd said, oh, for every 100 litres, we're going to have 60 litres of strawberry and 40 litres of banana. They're my materials. And again, you'd only here be looking at one aspect, almost certainly just materials. And so for materials, there's my cost card, or the start of my cost card. That's what I should be using for every 100 litres. And suppose the standard cost, strawberry is $8 a litre, banana is $4. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to do full numbers, I just want to explain the problem. And so how much should every 100 litres cost me? Strawberry for 80, 160, total 640. So it's a rather expensive fruit juice, but still. So that's what should be happening. Every 100 litres I produce should cost 640. But of course, when we come to variances, we're looking at what went wrong. You know, what could have gone wrong? Why might we end up costing different than 640? Well, one thing that could have gone wrong is obviously the price. We expect to pay $8 and $4. Maybe we actually end up having to pay $9 and $3.50. And obviously that would make the actual cost different. There'd be a variance. And so we will have a price or an expenditure variance. I'll show you the arithmetic on a full example in a moment. What else could have gone wrong though? Even if we were paying the correct prices, even if we did pay 8 and 4, we might decide, or we might be forced on us, we might end up mixing it slightly differently. Maybe we ended up only using 50 litres of strawberry. But of course, if we use 50 litres of strawberry, we have to use 50 litres of banana. And for whatever reason, if that's what we end up doing, then of course the total cost will change. It'd be 50 at 8, 50 at 4, it'd be different. So that's another thing that could change. And what's changed there? Well, we're still putting in 100 litres, but we've changed the mixture. We've decided to use a bit less strawberry and therefore automatically a bit more banana. But it will affect the total cost. And so it'll be a variance again, and we call that a mix variance. But finally, what else could change? Suppose we did put the right mixture in, we did pay the right prices. So we should have 100 litres at 6.40. But suppose some got lost in the process. Maybe we have to boil the juice and some disappeared as steam. Maybe we lost, for whatever reason, 10 and only ended up with 90. Well, of course, if we only end up with 90 litres and we paid 6.40, again, we end up with a variance. And we call that the yield variance. And so, in a second, we'll go on to the proper example, and I'll show you how we calculate the numbers. But that's what we're going to be looking at. A cost card where we know what the material should be, you know, how much we should pay. We'll look at what actually happened and decide whether it's overspent or underspent, how much was due to expenditure, how much was due to the way we mixed it, how much was due to this waste or yield. Before I do, just one point here. There are lots and lots of products that use more than one material. You know, even making a desk. You know, maybe a desk has a wooden top, material's wood, and it's got metal legs. So two types of material. But they're two completely separate materials. You know, maybe wood, you might use too much or too little. Completely separately, the metal, too much or too little. There you do two sets of material variances, each one in the normal way. What I'm talking about here is something that doesn't happen that often in real life, but where one material is replacing another. That I said, this mixed variance, because we're mixing them together and ending up with one juice, automatically, if we use less strawberry, we automatically use more banana. And that doesn't happen with desks. You know, you might use less wood, but that doesn't mean you're going to use less metal for the legs. They're two separate things. So the examiner will make it perfectly clear that mix and yield is wanted. But I'm just stressing, because of anything you might be asked to write, that do appreciate it's only when we can replace or substitute one with the other. Anyway, I hope you're clear as to what the basic problem is, but now let's look at an example. Example 3. The standard material cost per unit of a product is as follows. Material X, in fact I'll write this down, then I've got it in front of me. Material X, 2 kilos, $3 a kilo, $6. Material Y, 1 kilo, $2 a kilo, 2. And so in total, every unit should need 3 kilos of material, and each unit should cost in total $8. The actual production during the period was 5,000 units. And the materials used, well, we actually used 9,900 kilos of X and paid 27,000. And rather, we used 5,300 kilos of material Y and we paid 11,000. Well, what we're going to do in the exam, obviously, just do what's required, but everything here certainly could be. I'm going to first of all calculate what the total, the overall materials variance is, and then we will analyse it into those variances I mentioned earlier. So let's do it. First of all, the total variance. And for the total variance, as we always do for materials, we'll compare the actual total cost with the standard cost of the actual production. So what was the actual total cost? Whatever happened, how much did we spend in total? We bought X and Y, 27,000 plus 11. We actually spent 38,000. How much should we have spent? Well, the actual production was 5,000 units. If everything went perfectly, how much should each unit have cost? Well, from our cost card, it should be $8 a unit. We should have spent 40,000, or expected to spend 40. We only spent 38. And so in total, we've saved with a favourable variance of 2,000. So that's how much we've saved in materials overall. However, as I hopefully explained okay before, our job is to analyse it. How much of that saving was because the prices we paid were different? How much of that saving was because we mixed the materials differently? And how much of it was because in total, we used more or less than the 3 kilos we should have done? So let's go through them one by one. And there are lots of ways you can set out your workings. Obviously, there's only one right answer. Sometimes, as I mentioned as we go through, there might be shortcuts you can take. But I'll do it the way I prefer. I find it the easiest to remember. And also, you'll see what I mean as we do it. The way I set it out, you can in fact answer anything they might ask on it. Anyway, I'll go straight in. First of all, I'm going to look at the price or the expenditure variance. Now, be patient with me. You'll see I set it out in columns effectively. For the expenditure variance, we're going to take our actual purchases and we're going to compare how much we actually paid with how much we should have paid. So the actual purchases at actual cost, let me just do it, X and Y, that in kilos, we actually bought 9,900 kilos of X, we bought 5,300 kilos of Y. And how much did we actually spend in total? On X, 27,000. On Y, 11,000. We spent a total of 38,000. So that's what the actual purchase to actual cost. I'm going to compare that with the actual purchases at standard cost. So we know what the actual purchases were. 9,900 X, 5,300 Y. How much should we have paid? Well, from the cost card, X should have been $3 a kilo. Y should have been $2 a kilo. So for X, in total, we should have paid 29,700. For Y, 10,600. We should have paid 40,300. So actual purchases, actual cost, actual purchases, standard cost. We should have paid 40,300. We only paid 38. Well, the difference there is our expenditure variance. And how much have we saved? We paid a bit less overall, 2,300. It's favourable. We paid less than we expected. Now, normally, the exam would just want the total. However, they could ask you for the analysis of that 2, 3. Well, no problem. It's there already. You see, if you look at the figures, as far as X was concerned, we spent 27, we should have spent 29,700, we've saved 2,700. As far as Y is concerned, we actually spent 11, we should have spent 10,600, we've overspent 400. So don't do that unless it's asked for, but the two together, of course, a net 2,300 overall saving. All right, that's sorted that out. And so from now on, we can forget how much we actually spent. We can concentrate just on standard cost. But the next thing I'll look at is this mix. The mix variance. Now, again, I'm going to do it in columns. And I'll write the headings, but then I'll immediately do it. For the mix variance, we compare our actual mix. And what do I mean by that? What did we buy of X and Y? I'm going to have kilos and dollars in a minute again. But X, we actually bought 9,900. Y, 5,300. A total of 15,200. Well, I'm going to look at how we should have mixed it. The standard mix for the total input. And what do I mean by that? Well, the total we put in, rightly or wrongly, we bought a total of 15,200. How should I have split that between X and Y? Well, if you look at the cost card, for every 3 kilos, 2 of them should be X and 1 of them should be Y. So for that total, again, rightly or wrongly, we bought 15,200 kilos. And so 2/3 of those should have been X and 1/3 should have been Y. And so what should we have bought? X, 2/3 of 15,200. I could have chosen nicer figures, but anyway, 10,133. And Y, 1/3 of it, 5,067. And you can see immediately what's happened. It should have been 10,000, 5,000. What's happened is we bought less X's, but we bought more Y's, just like I was saying with the juices. We need to cost it. Well, remember, we've already dealt with the expenditure variance, so in both cases we'll cost at standard cost. And what were the costs? Standard costs in $3, $2. So I know we've already done these workings, you see, you can save time, just copy what we had above. But X, a standard cost is 29,700, Y, 10,600. Total, 40,300. As far as standard mix is concerned, that's what it should have been. Well, again, at standard cost, 3 and 2. 30,399. Can't do that one in my head. 10,134. 40,533. So for this bit alone, if we'd mixed it properly, the correct ratios, you'd have spent 40,533. The way we mixed it was slightly cheaper, 40,300. Well, the difference the mix variance is 233 and it's favourable. Our mix would have been cheaper, or was cheaper than standard mix. Now again, normally it's just the total that's needed. If we did want to analyse it, there's no extra workings, because for X, we would have spent 29,700 as against 33,99. So 29,700 minus 33,99, 699 favourable. Whereas Y, 10,600, it should have been only 10,134, 466 adverse. And of course, the net of the two, 233. And if you understood everything I've said, you know, my introductory little fruit juice example, it should be clear to you that always there'll be one favourable, one adverse, because you're automatically using more of one. Sorry, if you're using more of one, you're automatically using less of the other. And in fact, there was one question, it's a long time ago this, but part of a long question, and I think it was just 2 marks, or even 1 mark. It said, what would be the mix variance in kilos? A lot of people got very puzzled. You know, normally variances are in dollars, you know. But the mix variance, they're just testing you. The mix variance in kilos will always be 0. Because you'll be saving on one, and for the 10th time, saving less on one means more on the other. And of course, whether in dollars it gives an overall saving or favourable or adverse depends on whether you're using more or less of the expensive and therefore less or more of the cheap. Here what's happened, we've used less X's and more Y's. Less X's was saving us $3 a kilo. More Y's was costing us $2 a kilo. So we're saving more than the extra cost. That being a net saving. Anyway, we're not there yet. There's one more. We dealt with price, so I'm no longer worried about that. Standard cost of $3, $2. We dealt with the mix, so I'm no longer worried about that problem. But the problem left is that in total we did use 15,200 kilos. Was that more or less than what we should have used? I'll show you what I mean. This last one we call the yield variance. We take the actual total input at standard mix. Let me just write that down before I go any further. X and Y. The actual total input was 15,200 kilos. And how should we have mixed it? It should have been 2/3, 1/3. Which was 10, what was it? 10,133, 5067. So that's what we actually bought in total at standard mix, because I've dealt with mix variance. We'll compare it with the standard total input. At standard mix. For the actual output. Now that sounds awful, you can use different words, you don't have to use my words. But let's set it up. In total, how many kilos should we have used? We produced 5,000 units. And in total, how many kilos should we have used per unit? Look back at the cost card. Every unit should have used 2 kilos of X, 1 of Y. It should have been 3 kilos a unit. And so if they had done things perfectly, we would have used 15,000 kilos. Now immediately we can see something's gone wrong. We did only produce 5,000 units, but we used 15,200 kilos. You know, maybe that we lost some, wasted some, whatever. But see where those figures have come from. The actual total input, the total of what we bought, 15.2, compared with the standard input, how much should we have bought for our production? 15,000. And of course, how should it have been mixed? It should have been 2/3, 1/3. We should have bought 10,000 X and 5,000 Y. It needs costing, but we've dealt with the expenditure variance, so everything's costed at standard cost. And so standard cost, $3, $2. The first bit we'd already done if you look back, so you know you can save a lot of time. But 10,133 at $3 is 30,399. 5067 at $2 is, I'm scared, 10,134. And so the total, appreciate it's the same as we had today, so 4533. Using the correct quantities would have cost 30,000 and 10,000. Total 40. Well, the difference is our yield variance. A difference of 533. And of course it's adverse. We already knew it was going to be adverse. We used in total more kilos than we should have done. That on its own cost us more than it should have done. As I've kept on saying, normally it's just the total we need. If you were required to show the analysis, then X 3,399, 30,399 adverse, and Y 10,134, 10,000, 134 adverse. In total 533. And if you've been thinking and understanding, because I've said don't ever just learn rules. If you've understood what I'm saying, if you are required to split it between the materials, all of them will be adverse or all of them will be favourable. Okay, a couple of more things to say. First of all, let's just summarise and check it works. We had we've calculated expenditure variance, a mix variance, and a yield variance. Expenditure was 2,300 favourable. Mix variance 233 favourable. Yield variance 533 adverse. And so overall, what's the total variance? 2,000 favourable, which I think was what we got at the very beginning. Ages ago, yes, 2,000 favourable. So it does check. I did say at the beginning, only do what's required. You know, if you're not asked for the total, don't bother wasting time calculating the total. It has to be expenditure, mix and yield. and see what's happened, you see. Follow it through. If everything went perfectly, we'd have spent 40,000. Why didn't we spend 40? First thing we did went wrong. We ended up wasting some material. We used more material than we should have done for some reason. That cost us 533. So why didn't we spend 4533? What else went wrong? It should have been 4533 at the correct mix. We mixed it differently. But by mixing it differently, we managed to save a bit of money. 233. So we should have spent 4,300. Why didn't we spend 4,300? The last thing that went wrong is we paid the wrong prices. We ended up one material a lot cheaper, one slightly cheaper. We ended up saving money because of the prices. We only paid 38. What else? This question actually asks for one more variance. It says calculate the total cost variance, which we have done, the price variance, the mixed variance, the yield variance. It also asks for the usage variance. That's much less likely to be asked, but if you are asked for the usage variance, the usage relates to the mix and the yield. They're both ways in which we've used it wrongly. And although you can calculate it separately, you never would be required to. If there's ever mention of usage variance, it's those two together. 533 adverse, 233 favourable, it's 300 adverse. So nothing to worry about there. Second, the interpretation. You can't learn a rule here. It's a question of have you understood it and extra information given in the question, which doesn't affect the arithmetic, but to give you a clue. We got a favourable mixed variance. Now, not in this question, what I'm about to say, but just think about why you might change the mix. There are lots of reasons you might change the mix. It might be an accident. You might have been forced to change the mix because perhaps one of the materials was hard to get. I'm not going to waste time looking back here, but if material X was in short supply, you may have been forced to use more material Y, whether there was a saving or whether there was an extra cost. Or another reason could have been deliberately to save money. You know, material X here is more expensive, and so you may deliberately decide, oh, let's save a bit of money, use a bit less X, a bit more Y. You know, so there's several reasons why these various variances can have occurred. You know, the yield variance, one way or another, it's wasting or losing material. It could be because you know, we'd been over-optimistic when we did our cost cards. We knew we'd lose some. Or it could just be, you know, there has been a fault somewhere which you need to investigate. And of course, price variance, well, that's the normal chat with any expenditure variance. Maybe prices went up, maybe we went to the wrong supplier, whatever. Incidentally, you wouldn't be asked to do planning and operational and mix and yield in the same question. There's usually a variance question in section C, and although a few more I need to look at later in the chapter, it's usually either planning and operational or mix and yield. And finally, just let me repeat what I said at the very beginning. Looking at the mix variance is only sensible, relevant, when it's something like fruit juice, where you're replacing one material with another. It won't be your problem in the exam to decide, you'll be told. But, you know, remember what I said earlier about the desk. I remember one example which made me laugh. It was a drug company, medicine drugs, where there are various ingredients, various chemicals, you know, they change the mix. Now, I thought that was a bit odd because the arithmetic was no harder, you know. Could have been chemical X, chemical Y. But whereas for fruit juice, change the mix and, you know, all that happens, it might taste a bit different. I think with medicinal drug, changing the mix could be rather more serious things to consider than whether we save money or spend money. Another example, which you'll probably find in your revision kit, was a cake. We're making cakes. And there were several ingredients, there weren't just 2. 4 or 5 ingredients, so it took longer, but it was no harder. And I go, okay, with a cake, I think we can change the mixture a bit less butter and a bit more flour. That's not really a problem. Anyway, that's enough. We'll leave that one there. In the next lectures, I'll run through the other possible advanced variances, which are, as I've said, less likely.